Writing an original song from scratch gets a lot easier once you have a good starting point to build off of. It might be a set of lyrics, a chord progression, a riff, but in today's video, I'm going to walk you through the process of making awesome sounding music when your starting point is just a simple rhythmic pattern. Specifically, we're going to be composing with the double tresillo today. I've already explained this pattern on my channel, and it actually popped up in my last video. But in today's video, we're going to be really going through the process of writing, composing, and producing our own music. That means I'm not going to be doing a lot of explaining about music theory. So if you get lost or confused along the way, I'm just going to have to recommend check out some of my older videos or head over to my website and take a look at the courses I have for sale. I promise they'll get you up to speed. We're going to be composing two different kinds of music. One is going to be very heavy metal, and one is not. I really don't know how to define it, so you'll have to stick around to help me label the genre. So let's start making some music. We're going to begin by stealing the exact same double tresillo pattern we saw in my last video on Metallica's Orion. That rhythmic pattern looks like this, but I'm going to rewrite it using eighth notes and quarter notes just to make it easier to count. Now, even though this is 4/4, we can count it with that double tresillo pattern by thinking of 1 and 2 and 3, 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 1 and 2, 3 and 4. Now, I like that, and I want to steal it. But I can't just steal it note for note. That seems a little lame, so we'll have to come up with some sort of variation here. This little grouping of 3 here is 4 eighth notes and 1 quarter note. But there's a lot of variations we could try out there. We could do 2 quarter notes and 2 eighth notes. We could do a half note and then 2 eighth notes. What I opted for is 2 eighth notes and then 1 half note. That gives me 1 and 2, 3, 1 and 2, 3, 1 and 2, 3, 1 and 2, 3, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. I left that last part the exact same. So now I have a new rhythm, and to me this is like half of the puzzle. When you're trying to write music, half of it is when do you play the notes? Well, now I know when to play the notes, so the next part of the question is what notes do I play? Now obviously there's infinite varieties of things we could add to that rhythm, but what I started playing around with is octaves, a high E and a low E, and then another high E and a low E. I was liking that pattern. Then I started expanding that high E to move up different notes, so I had high E, F, G, and G sharp. So that gives me a root, a flat 2, a flat 3, and a major third. So we cannot be in a key anymore. There's no way there's a single key that contains a minor third and a major third. So we've got this creepy little atonal movement kind of pedaling over a low E. And we have a great rhythm to back up that weird melodic motion. Now the problem is when I started recording that riff, it was lacking a lot of the energy and depth that I wanted. And I thought an easy solution would be just play it on my 7-string guitar instead. That should add a lot of that low, deep energy. So I grabbed my 7-string guitar, played the exact same riff on the low strings, which basically puts it into the key of B something. I used the Neural DSP Gojira plugins, and it sounded something like this. Now, I took that riff, panned it all the way to one speaker, and then recorded the exact same riff again and panned it all the way to the right speaker. Then I took the same riff and I recorded it on my bass guitar, which fortunately has 5 strings, so I didn't have to do any detuning to play this riff. Next, I found an organ patch and added some distortion to it, and then layered in this exact same melodic line. We have a low droning E, and then creeping up to F, and then G and G sharp. So that just kind of washes away in the background to give us some more frequency, some more stuff going on other than just riffs. And lastly, I added in a drum pattern. The kick drum really just highlights the rhythm that we've been working with here, and the rest is pretty rudimentary. Simple eighth notes and quarter notes on the hi-hats, and the snares coming in on some pretty obvious ones. I love the way that sounded. I got these images of like an angry, disheveled Poseidon rising out of the ocean and just laying siege to innocent vessels on the sea. But as nice as the riff was, we needed to follow it up with something. So I wanted to write another riff to complement it, and I kind of took the lazy route of just getting rid of all the notes. Let's just stick to a single note, our tonic B. And we can take that same rhythm pattern and just blast away at it 1 EN, 2, and a 3, 4 EN, and a 2, 3 EN, 4 EN. And then we can use that as like the bass layer for maybe a guitar solo. So that's what I did. Just once again, double tracking this guitar, doing that simple rhythm on just B. Now, since that's pedaling on just a B note, it gives us a lot of freedom to throw lots of different notes on top of that. We're really not restricted to a key, so we can kind of play with the harmony here. What I did is decided to add in some organs that play a B minor chord. We can think of that as a tonic. Then I decided to bring in a C sharp major chord. That's a major 2 chord. I like to think of that as being borrowed from the Dorian sharp 4 scale. That's a mode of harmonic minor. I honestly think that's the easiest way to interpret that chord. Then we have an E minor chord. That's just going to be the 4 chord, and then back to B minor. So we're layering that chord progression on top of a low steady B to give us this cool, intriguing, mysterious little harmony. Now, I did decide to play a guitar solo on top of this, and what we're supposed to do as guitarists is we're supposed to analyze every chord and figure out what key it's in and stuff like that, but there's also the route of just, blare away at pentatonic minor and play chromatics and just do whatever sounds good. I kind of took that route. So the solo here is mostly just pentatonic minor or the blues scale with a lot of chromatics thrown in there. However, the important thing to note about the solo is how often I rely on the double tresillo pattern. I figured if we're composing with that, let's really lean into it and add as many references as we comfortably can to that pattern of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now there's really only one other section to this piece. It's just a big G power chord. I'm thinking of that as the flat 6 chord, and then we return back to our rhythm pattern. But what I want to point out here is that this is the first time I'm going to play the rhythm pattern without resting the palm mutes. Before in the song, I'm playing these notes, and I'm playing them very staccato so they don't ring out. There's nothing that sustains. But in just this one part of the piece, we're going to just let the palm mute sustain. It gives it a really, really nice low, once again, I'm thinking of an oceanic effect. And I'm just going to comment, this is another thing I'm stealing. I first heard this in Killswitch Engage's My Curse. There's one moment where they're doing this exact same kind of thing where it's always a staccato rhythm pattern where it's instantly rested. But then all of a sudden in one part of the song, they let it ring out. It's a subtle change, and it's actually the exact same rhythm that we're working with. So maybe that's why it crept in here, is because, my brain was associating that rhythm with that little production technique. Either way, once the solo's over, we just go back to the intro riff that we wrote and we add some tremolo picking on top. And if we put the whole thing together, it sounds like this. Now, if that was too loud for your precious little eardrums, I understand. We're going to move on to something a little bit more chilled out, but I think this one's very interesting. To start off, I'd once again like to steal something, and this time I'm going to steal the beginning to Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle. That's just the B pentatonic minor scale going down, but it's done with the double tresillo rhythmic pattern. You can hear the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the pattern we're doing. Let's just reverse that. We'll start on the low note, and we'll move up the scale. To me, that no longer sounds like Welcome to the Jungle. And it'll sound less like that when we move it into the key of D instead. So this is the riff that we're composing with, this little idea right here. Now, in Welcome to the Jungle, there are different chords that appear underneath that riff to give it an awesome effect. That's the composing technique I explore in my video, Writing with Motifs and Chords. I still think it's one of the best lessons I've ever published for songwriters, and we're seeing that in effect here. We have a static, unchanging motif, and then we can do all sorts of different chords underneath that to create a different effect. Now, I obviously don't want to steal the same chords that Guns N' Roses use, so I tried to write a completely unique chord progression, and here's what I ended up coming up with. The first time we hear this riff, we'll hear a D minor 7 chord underneath it. That's pretty expected, because if you look at the notes of a D minor 7 chord, well, all those notes are also in the D minor pentatonic scale. The next time we play the riff, we're going to hear a D minor 6th chord underneath it. So we're already getting into a little Dorian flavor already. Next we have a B flat over D, which means we're no longer in Dorian. And then the fourth chord, we're just going to do a regular D minor. Now the second time, it's pretty similar. We're going to have D minor 7, D minor 6, but this time it's just a G minor, that's the 4 chord, and then we end with a picardy third. We're going to go back to D major, which means I'm going to change this riff a little bit to actually use a major third. We don't want to be mashing minor thirds and major thirds together at the same time unless we want a bluesy effect or unless we really want to sound bad on purpose. And I want this to be a little blossoming, happy little shining moment of optimism before it just crashes us back into the minor key. So that's the core foundations of the song that I wrote. What I did is just recorded my electric guitar playing the riff that we discussed. Then I added an 1/8 note delay to give it some interesting sound. Next, I recorded that delay signal output, and then I turned it into its own layered track so I could blend it in and get some goopy sound effects going on in the background. Then I started layering in that chord progression using the guitar. I programmed the exact same chords into some synthesizers. Mainly it was a Rhodes keyboard and some synth pads. And the next layer was another synthesizer. This time I just decided to drone away at a D minor chord and then slightly pivot it to D major to accent that picardy third. And I threw an arpeggiator on there and an auto filter to get this wonderful little spacey sound. Next, I shifted my attention to the rhythm department. I took a clave and I put in a reverse double tresillo. So instead of 3-3-3-3-4, we're doing 4-3-3-3-3. Additionally, there's a hi-hat just playing strict 1/8 notes to give us a steady idea of what our rhythmic grid sounds like. We added in a bass guitar. Then I programmed in a drum part. And clearly my inspiration was a drum beat that Beardstank had already played on this channel back in my lesson on suspended chords. I basically just took that groove, added it on top here, and it sounds like this. Now this is one of the rare tracks I actually decided to sing on. So I wrote some lyrics, sang them very poorly, and I heavily auto-tuned them, split them across 3 different tracks to get this sound.
I cannot find a way to justify the things I need to say. I tried to turn around, pretending that I didn't hear the sound. Oh, now once again, go through it with me. Help me understand why. It's you and me, just you and me. I think that maybe we could add another star into the sky.
So hopefully you would agree that neither of those songs sound like Metallica, and neither of those songs sound like Guns N' Roses, yet we can clearly find actual definable parallels between our compositions here today and the ones that already exist. And I'm hoping that this kind of enlightens you to the fact that it's a good idea to steal music from people. But once you steal it, make sure that you alter it so it's unrecognizable. And I know this might sound lazy, but I'm sorry, there's only 12 notes in Western music, there's only so many rhythms. It's almost impossible to come up with something brand new. What you can do is take something old and turn it into something new. You can take an old recipe and put a new spin on it. And hopefully that's what we've accomplished here today. Taking the old recipe of the double tresillo rhythm and turning it into original, unique music that doesn't really sound like it was stolen from anywhere. So I hope you found this lesson educational, informative, and maybe even entertaining. If you did enjoy this lesson, I'm going to encourage you to head over to my Patreon. That's a place where you can donate every month to keep these lessons going for free without any ads or sponsorships in the middle. My Patreon supporters are the reason these free lessons exist, and I wouldn't be able to do it without them, so they have my appreciation, and I hope they have yours as well. Check the links below in the description to join them, but if you can't do something like that, it would help out if you just like this video, click subscribe, and maybe post some comments down below. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.